Hello, welcome to Learn Page by Page. I'm Sally, and in this video I'm going to cover quadratic inequalities. Now, a quadratic inequality, what is it? Well, a quadratic inequality is one that contains x squared as its highest power of x, or a squared term, because you could be dealing with inequalities that don't use x. They might use other letters, a or y, you never know. But the squared term is its highest power. So let's tackle this question first, and as we walk through it, I'll explain all the different theories and rules that you need to apply. Here's an example question. Solve the inequality x squared is greater than 4, and they want you to show your solution on a number line. They might say graph your solution, just means exactly the same thing. I do have another video on graphing inequalities on number lines, so I will link that at the end for you. Let's start off, write the inequality out. It was x squared is greater than 4. Now, when you look at an inequality, look at it like an equation. The inequality sign could be like an equals, but don't change it because you are still working with inequalities. And do be careful when you rearrange it that you don't divide or multiply by a negative value, because if you do, you have to flip the inequality sign. I do cover that in Introduction to Inequalities. Anyway, let's rearrange this inequality so we have it with x minus 4 on one side and 0 on the other side. So we're going to minus 4 from both sides, and that gives us x squared minus 4 is greater than 0. You might perhaps notice what you have here. You have a squared term with the x squared, and then you have a negative 4. If you know factorising quadratics well, you will recognise that that is what we call the difference of two squares, where we have an x squared, a negative sign, and this would be a squared term of some kind, either a number or a letter. In this case, we have a number, and 4, well, the square root of 4 is 2, and as we're dealing with a negative, going to be a negative 2 and a positive 2. When you see an expression in this form, when you factorise it, just means putting it into brackets, you're going to end up with an x there and x there. Because you have a negative, one of them is going to be a negative, one's going to be a positive, and then you'll have a here and a here. So in the case of our quadratic here, when we factorise this, we get x minus 2 and x plus 2. That's still greater than 0. Remember, when you do rewrite any quadratic in factorised form, when you're dealing with equals 0 or greater than 0, you must include it in this line, because all you've done is you've rewritten exactly that, but just in factored form. So this tells us that the graph of y equals x squared minus 4 crosses the x-axis at when x equals 2 and when x equals minus 2. And if we were to draw that on a regular graph, it would actually look like this. So there's your graph, and you're going to go through minus 2, down here, back up through positive 2, something roughly like that. But what this shows us is the graph is greater than 0. So when we're talking about 0, we're talking about 0 on the y-axis. We're talking about the y-axis here. There is 0, and it's asking us, when is this graph greater than 0? Well, it's when it's above the x-axis here, because here and obviously here, try not to include the actual x-axis itself. And how you draw that on a number line is like this. So you draw a number line that includes positive 2 and negative 2, one number after. You could do couple of numbers after if you want, and your solution is x is less than minus 2 and x is greater than 2. You're going to use an open circle. You would use a solid circle if the number was included, but the number's not included, so we use an open circle or hollow circle. You put hollow circle on 2, hollow circle on minus 2 and on 2. The important part here now is your arrow. So you're going to draw an arrow going from 2 and then going from minus 2 that way. Let's try one more. You can see this time I've found one that includes a less than or equals to symbol. So we're going to be using a solid circle. Let's write the inequality out. And same as before, we're going to rearrange it as if it was an equation. So what do I have? Well, my squared term here is negative. I'd rather it be positive. It's easier to factorise. So I'm going to move this negative x squared and this positive 6, both of them, I'm going to move them over there. The way I would do that is I would add x squared and I would subtract 6. I always make a note either side what I've done, partly because it helps me when I go back and look over my work. But more importantly, if you're doing this in an exam, there could be a mark or a credit given for letting the examiner know that's what you've done. It's a good habit to keep. We rewrite that. We have x squared, then the letter term plus x, and then the number term, which was 6, less than or equals to 0. And the first thing we would do is take a look at that and see if we can factorise it, and we can. And when you're factorising, you're looking for two numbers that will multiply to make the number term, but they're going to add to make the letter term. Rewrite the inequality with the brackets, and you're going to have x plus 3 and x minus 2. So that tells us that the graph of y equals x squared plus x minus 6 crosses the x-axis at -3 and +2. It'll look something roughly like this. You can see it goes through -3 and it goes through +2. But because this inequality is less than or equals to, the -3 and the +2 is included. And this quadratic is less than 0. Zero's here, remember, and we're talking about 0 on the y-axis, and it is less than 0. The way you present that on a number line, first thing you do is write out the inequality. So here we have, and we do it like this, we write x in the middle, and then we say x is less than or equal to 2, and then we go back to x and we say, but it is greater than or equal to -3. And then draw your number line, find -3 and draw yourself a solid circle. Find +2, draw a solid circle, and the line you draw is in between the two. And that should be about everything. Thank you so much for watching. Here's a couple of other videos that you might find useful or connected to inequalities, and do go ahead and hit the subscribe. That would really help the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.